it's a pleasure to be here today, especially to talk about how to unlock finance to circular businesses. That eventually is part of why we are all sitting here today. I mean, it's to not only to talk about what is going on in the World Circular Economy Forum, but it's also to understand what is happening in Kenya, in particular, on access to finance for circular companies. So we have a very good panel today. We just had coffee, 4 of us together, and it's very, I think it's diverse, so that we'll be able to see different kind of perspectives of what is happening on circular economy, circular companies, some of the challenges that companies have to access capital from different perspectives, from Josephine's side, from Berta as a company, and then from Margaret of the African Development Bank. So looking forward for the discussions. I will not wait more and give the chance to each of them to explain to you what they do in relation with circular economy and how they relate to companies and basically what are they engaged on. So let me start on my left because you are closest to me. And yes, please feel free to explain what do you do on circular economy.
Good morning, everybody. It's a few minutes to noon, so it's still morning. My name is Josephine Wawira, and I'm a communications expert with a very great passion in circular economy and sustainability. Currently, I'm working with the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and our mission is to ensure year-on-year improvement on the business environment in Kenya. And to do this, we work with different stakeholders and the government. And also we realize that as the voice of the private sector and through our mandate, then we also have a responsibility to ensure and to assist businesses to become sustainable, to ensure that their models are more circular. And this is why we formed what we call the Sustainable Inclusive Business Kenya, which is a neutral initiative that works with all the stakeholders to ensure that we work with a key focus on 3 areas, and that is the planet, the people, and the profits. So as businesses focus on the profits, they also need to understand and pay a very key attention to what are their impacts on the people they work with, the communities where they operate, but also on the planet, and to reduce or minimize the negative impacts while increasing the positive impact. So I think I'm very excited to be part of this panel with its diversity, and also to look at some of the investment opportunities and also barriers that are hindering some the circular economy. Someone said earlier on the panel that was speaking from Helsinki that it depends on how you you look at it. It can either be an empty cup or a half full or half empty, right? So while circular economy is an asset sector, for me, it means more opportunities for growth, and more opportunities for growth means more opportunities for investment. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bertha Mvati, and I head the vehicle and asset finance at Basico. So Basico is an e-mobility company. It's an early startup company that is looking to decarbonize Nairobi and Africa at large through introduction of electric buses in the country. Many people ask why electric buses, why are we in that space? And that's because that's where there's the greatest impact. So for those of you who might not know, there are 20,000 buses in Nairobi alone. These are diesel buses, and if you do the calculations of the pollution that is there, it's quite significant, and that's why we are in that space, innovating our way and trying to change the space. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Margaret Kamau, and I work with the African Development Bank based here in Nairobi. I'm sure we are a development institution, and I'm sure many are asking, what could a bank do in circular economy? There's actually quite a lot that we've been doing. We've been supporting the process of circular economy uptake since 2017, when we supported the establishment of the Africa Circular Economy Alliance. And that alliance is a platform for countries to showcase best practices in circular economy. It was started through 2 countries, Rwanda and South Africa, which led the development of that alliance. And thereafter, we've grown to about 12 countries and a number of partner institutions. So the whole point of the platform, which is the alliance, is to enable countries to showcase their best practices. Internally at the bank, we also have a facility called the Africa Circular Economy Facility. And this is funded through the generous support of the government of Finland, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, and the Nordic Development Fund as well. So through that facility that we run, we hope to implement some of the work that was talked about if you watched the event earlier. The development of circular economy roadmaps, and also further down the line, we also hope to support innovation. I know some of the entrepreneurs here who put their hands up. You may be interested to know, how can you scale up your business? Which way can we be incubated? So, further down the line, that's what the facility will aim to invest in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, as you can see, we have variety of knowledge now with us. I would recommend you, I don't know you use LinkedIn very often, but I'm following both Sustainable Inclusive Business Kenya. I don't want to make a mistake in the name. I follow them on LinkedIn, and they have a lot of interesting content. I also follow the company of Berta in LinkedIn that is called Basico. And the other day I was looking at some of the photos that they put there in LinkedIn, and they were actually, somebody took a photo of 2 electric buses. One of them was Basico, the other one was Rome. I don't know, you know that other company also on electric buses called Rome. So there were actually 2 electric buses in the same moment, in the same road. And people were saying, oh, look at this. Huh? We are getting into it. We are moving into the electric buses finally. So obviously also you can follow the African Development Bank on LinkedIn, but both of them are here in Kenya. And I'm not working for LinkedIn to make publicity, don't worry. But yes. So anyhow, looking forward now to enter into more details because they have experience. You can see they have been setting up companies. African Development Bank has a specific fund. Josephine has been working now for a number of years supporting circular companies. So let me start by asking them what is the experience and what have they been feeling as barriers or issues of circular economy companies being able to access capital. Capital either from banks or from capital markets, meaning from impact funds, or eventually also maybe from grants. I don't know. There are many different ways for companies to access capital. So let's now try to start by what are the problems or barriers that you faced when you have been trying to support circular economy companies, please.
Thank you for that question. And I'm excited to be a Kenyan today, especially because I believe that we have our nose in the right direction. Kenya is a trailblazer when it comes to circular economy. And we have also led in the policy development, and Nasra mentioned before, and also Dr. Ayub in the morning, on some of the policy and legislative developments that we are making as a country. If we go back to the Sustainable Waste Management Policy of 2020, which also came into being a bill in 2021, we look at what we currently have undergoing, the mandatory extended producer responsibility as well, which is looking to bring the responsibility of the producers to deal with the end-of-life products so that we reduce what goes more into the environment and keep most of the materials in use. Now, when we are looking at the barriers, again, we are in the early stages still as we compare to Western world. We're making progress, but we are still in the very beginning of this policy development. But development is not the issue. Implementation is the issue. And some of those implementation stages take quite long. Now, I remember last year having a conversation with a potential investor in the country from South Africa, and they're looking to have a bottle-to-bottle recycling plant in Kenya. And that was last year. The thing they were very sure is that we want to do this in the country because there's potential. However, we have to wait, or our timeline is about 2 to 3 years to start, because then the EPR regulation will at least have started coming into action. So the implementation phase of policies that we have in the country sometimes becomes a barrier, because investors, both local and international, are looking at coming into a market that is ready for investment, especially for a sector that is still very young, and they need to be assured that policy as well will support their investment. So the potential is there, but when we look at policy implementation, we need to be more confident and move at speed, and that will also support the private investors. I'm also looking at tax and legislation. I think today we are at one of the biggest conversations in the country when it comes to taxes, impacting both individuals or Kenyans, what we call the Wanjikus, but these impacts are also being felt at the business levels. Investors might be reluctant looking at the shaky economic status of a country, and this does not only apply in Kenya, it applies across all the African states. So how is the tax and legislation environment looking like before they put their money into the circular economy sector? Innovations, a lot of us, or some of us here, are young innovators, and we have a situation where even investors and banks and financial institutions are looking at the past. You know, the way you go to a bank and they tell you, bring me your bank, your pay slips for the last 3 months, 5 months before I lend you a loan or a facility. True? So for circular economy, let's say for innovations and for green projects, when they tell you to look at the back or at the past, instead of looking at what is the potential moving forward, then it becomes a challenge. And for me, I see the some roadmaps, for instance, being one of the solutions to this challenge, where banks and facilities are being based on an industry that is young, because this is mostly somewhere you're coming to a bank with promises. That is, this is what I am able, or this is what I see as a potential to a solution that is provided to fill a gap in the market. True? So if we can help these young businesses to create roadmaps and business plans that can outline those potential opportunities, and through what I call sandboxing, or we call sandboxing. So you give them an opportunity to develop in a market that is young, and also viewing the potential rather than looking at the back of where they have come from. I think, Adolfo, I'll also give the other panelists.
Actually, let me pick on something that you mentioned on regulations, and also refer to the Kenya plastic pack, because I've been hearing about that. I think it's a very interesting development in that particular sector. So how do you think that the Kenya Plastic Pact has helped, for example, in that specific sector on addressing some of the issues that you have been talking about, like maybe regulations or something? How do you think that pact has helped to accelerate certain things that maybe is allowing companies in that specific sector to be able to access capital in an easier way? I don't know. Just trying to focus only on that subsector of circular economy. What is your experience on that?
So for purposes of understanding, the Kenya Plastics Pact is a voluntary initiative that was started in 2021 as a collaborative initiative between different stakeholders, from the public to the private sector, the civil society, the waste pickers, to bring all these people in the value chain, the plastics particularly value chain, to create a circular economy for plastics. What do we mean by this is to ensure that, again, we have less of the plastic waste going back into the environment, and making sure that we keep as many materials within the circular economy loop. So currently we operate on what we take resources, we make products, we use them, and then we discard them. So a circular economy focuses on making sure that we reduce the amount of waste that goes back into the environment, and keeping all these resources as efficient as possible. When it comes to the Plastics Pact, we do a lot of lobbying as well, working together with government and also with financial partners. So for instance, with the recent launch of the guidelines, design guidelines for recyclability, we'll go a step forward to help designers of products in the private sector to design their plastics products to be more recyclable and reusable. But now the challenge comes in asking, where is the financing for us to be able to implement these designs? And so we have also launched a challenge, an innovation challenge, that will say we are going to handhold you through the innovation challenge, provide the technical assistance to help you understand the guidelines. Let's say these are the additives that if you put, make recycling completely impossible. If you go with this, some are more problematic than others, but if you reduce these additives, then your products become more recyclable. And so we increase the recycling rate in the country, which is currently at around 8 to 10%, to a target of 40% that has been set by the Kenya Plastics Pact by 2030. So bringing in these innovation challenges, where you challenge the producers to make their products more innovative, and also building consortiums with other stakeholders who have the funding to make sure now you support these innovations to move from paper to implementation. And so at the end of the day, going beyond the policy, because when the EPR comes into phase, when we have the bans, like we had the ban on the plastic bag, we have the ban on single-use plastics in protected areas. When these policy implementations take place, then some businesses, and especially for the young innovators, now that you're starting, it is important to start bearing these aspects in mind, because you might start developing a product and then 2 years down the line, a policy comes and that product is banned. So being ready for these policies and seeing the impact that they will have on your business in the longer term, and start making adjustments from the beginning, that will also help in terms of attracting investments.
Thank you very much. That was very good. So we move now to Berta, and then tell us a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that you had in your company to be able to attract capital, different kind of capital. Like we have been talking before, eventually maybe grants or funding from equity investors. What was a bit your journey? Where did you see difficulties, and maybe also from the banking sector, if you deal with them?
Thank you for that question. So like the biggest barrier I would say, and we faced looking at the local bank partners available, is the lack of structures. So not the lack of structures, but rigid structures and unavailability or unable for them to change structures. So I'll give an example. As Justin just mentioned, is you'd go to a bank and they'll ask you for your last 3 months pay slip. They want to see historical cash flows as well as future cash flows. So when you're a startup and when you're talking about anything green economy, it's all avenues that are just starting out. So most of the times you don't have historical cash flows. So the bank's being able to just focus on the future cash flows and the business at the point it is has been one of the challenges that we've had. Another challenge is having institutions that, different stakeholders who support you, being able to understand that this is a new product, trying to just learn from developed markets where it's a little bit more developed than it is here, and to try and implement it here in a local version has also been a challenge. So just some sort of very tight thinking and not wanting to open up a bit.
You didn't say about banks much, no? Are banks your friends or are your enemies or somewhere in between?
No, so banks are our friends, and it takes a while for us to get there with them. It's a process, it's a journey, it's a relationship that we are forming. So currently, we've got some MOUs we've signed with banks that we're working with who are all willing to embrace e-mobility. And remember, they also have guidelines from the central bank in terms of having a certain % of their book being green, funding the green and circular economy as well. So it's a process for them. They need to change a lot of things, a lot of policies. And from a local perspective, and us being mostly local, we understand how our banks are. So it's something that will take time. So it's a journey we are walking, and yes.
Berta, let me just clarify something, if I understand correctly. Your main funders of your company are equity investors, isn't it? And maybe some of them are impact investors. Could you give to the audience like a kind of sharing a little bit who are your investors, who is supporting Basico to grow? Because I have seen Basico growing from the very beginning and now into a company that is getting more and more buses, and we are going to see more and more buses actually on the roads of Nairobi, which is great. But can you share with us some of those impact investors or equity investors that have supported you in the journey, just to better understand who are the ones?
Right, yeah. So Basico, we've raised around just slightly over $10 million, and it's mostly from equity investors and venture capitalists. So our biggest financier is Novastar. One of their funds has invested slightly about $5 million, so they're the leading investor in Basico. We've got other smaller ones. We've got companies like Moxie Ventures, Mobility 54, Total Tracks. So there are quite a number who've invested in us. But other than that, we also have grants. So just talking about financing and innovative financing, you have different types, a blended finance. You have different types of finance that you can get to use. And it depends on the stage at which you are at. So initially, we applied for grants and awards where we got some support. We had something that came from Novastar. We had something that came from Total Energies Carbon Solutions to support our proof of concept. So depending on where you are as a business, you target then where you can go. So at the beginning, at your proof of concept, you want grants and you want awards that you can use for that. Then you get to where you're commercializing, yeah? Mm-hmm. And that's where we are currently, where we're now working with the equity partners. And then once you start scaling up is when you're able to go to banks. So banks want to be able to see they want a bankable product. They want to be able to see cash flows, and then you look at things of how do you de-risk this for the banks and whichever financial institutions. So can we get grants? Like I know FDB have some grants. So in terms of default grants, how do we risk guarantees and things like that we're able to put in place?
Thank you, Berta. Thank you very much. I think we asked the question before, or the MC asked the question of how many entrepreneurs are here on circular economy, and there were a number of hands up, but we didn't ask how many financial institutions are here today. Is there anybody from financial institutions here today? No? But apart from our friends from the European Investment Bank, I'm talking more about either banks or venture capital funds that they are interested in this sector. We don't have anyone here today. So then we are free to talk about the banks badly, you know? Anyhow, let's move into Margaret. Also, what are the kind of barriers African Development Bank has been facing on supporting circular economy companies? Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think the two previous panelists have really outlined it, how the situation is on the ground. Let me try to give a bit of a perspective from us as a development finance institution. Yes, we have the name bank, and yes, we are friends. So let me give an idea of, some of the things that we're trying to do. So of course, one of the challenges of circular economy is the understanding. You know, for the longest time, when you mention circular economy, it's linked with waste management, and then everyone just thinks, oh, you know, this is just about collection and disposal. But you know, when you actually understand circular economy, you realize it's, you know, it's economy-wide. It cuts across so many different you know, areas, and therefore understanding, making sure we have a common understanding is one of the, you know, huge barriers. So at the bank, the work that we are supporting on roadmaps at the country level, you know, tries to ensure that we as countries have a common understanding, and that understanding also links with the policy and legislative framework within the country. So, you know, Kenya is very well renowned for our legislative framework is really one of the best across Africa and even in the world. And we can see that we even have the Sustainable Waste Management Policy Act. We also supported the Green Economy Strategy and Implementation Plan. So, you know, those are some of the areas that go into, that feed into developing a roadmap when you have a clear picture of where you want to go. So then the next level after that, once the roadmap is clear and the understanding is common, the next step then is to identify at the continent-wide level, what are the challenges and what are the country contexts and what are the country opportunities that exist in circular economy. So at the bank, we have done a study on identifying circular economy opportunities. We worked across 3 countries. At the time, that was the scope that we were working in. It was Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Algeria. And identified, you know, what are the opportunities for circular economy in those countries? What does the legislative framework look like? And also in identifying investable business cases. So, you know, that will take me to the last point about, and I think, you know, maybe the pain point that many entrepreneurs here will have, you know, making sure that your idea is investable, making sure that when you walk into a bank that they understand and are then able to put the money into your idea. So the last step that we see in the process is a number of SMEs in Kenya and in Africa require a lot of hand-holding. There's, you know, jumping into the market directly is not sustainable. You often need some hand-holding, and we have seen that it has been proven in through working through innovation hubs. So, you know, there are good examples across the continent on innovation hubs that have gone on to support SMEs to develop their business, pilot it, have mentorship, and then thereafter scale out. So within the circular economy facility, that's one of the areas that we hope to venture towards. You know, perhaps working with one of the innovation hubs to see if we can bring together a few SMEs, build up their capacity, offer them some mentorship, and you know, link them up with also existing businesses that are out there in the developed world. And then through that enterprise support, we then, you know, enable them to scale up and scale out. So I think those are how I see us addressing the barriers. Let me talk a bit about risk, how we are addressing the risk issue. So within the bank, we do have our normal investment instruments, that's loans, grants, but we also do have a well-developed structure of guarantees. We have partial credit guarantees and partial risk guarantees, which go towards, you know, de-risking investments in unknown sectors. You know, I must say currently we haven't applied these to circular economy, but I am pretty sure in the future there will be the opportunity to explore that. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That's very, very good. Let me go back to Berta. Don't move your this one, please. You spoke a bit about some of the challenges that you had, but we have been focusing a bit on those issues. Now, it would be good to understand what do you think has been some model of financing, innovative financing model that has worked for you guys? What do you think that eventually, after having some of the challenges that you mentioned before, it has led to you to have this kind of diversified equity investments in your company? What do you think are these kind of innovative models that work for your company in terms of accessing the capital?
Thank you for that question. So I'll explain a little bit about the model that we use at Basico. And with any innovative and new technology that is there, you find it that it's expensive. And that way, then adoption becomes a challenge. So just giving a local example to what we have, the electric buses. An electric bus compared to a diesel bus is about 2 to 3 times, the cost of what you would get a diesel bus locally. So as Basigo, what we were able to do to make sure that there's adoption. I mean, if you put that bus on the bucket and you put a diesel bus, no one will go for the electric bus, despite the advantages and the impact that is there. So the total cost of ownership when it comes to electric buses, it's more affordable, but they look at the upfront costs. The local Monanchi looks at the upfront costs. What am I parting with at the beginning? So what we're able to do as Basigo is be able to give them on a pay-per-use, so sort of a leasing model where we charge them per use. Every kilometer you've driven, we're able to charge you that so that we make it affordable for them. So have a small down payment at the beginning, and then they are able to pay per use. So that's one of the, that's actually our innovative model and how we've been able to do it and make it adoptable by everyone and for everyone to be able to afford it in the sector.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. Now that you give me an idea, maybe I start doing business also of electric buses. Let me come to Josephine now, because you mentioned already a little bit about how, for example, the Kenya Plastics Pact has helped into unlocking capital. But what is just more in general now into the circular economy sector? How do you think that we can attract more private investment into the various circular economy projects in Kenya, based on your experiences?
I like that question, and Margaret, I'm really tempted to challenge and ask a question. And you mentioned that you have incentives that are looking into the unknown sectors, and you mentioned that for the circular economy you have not started, but you will start soon. So I know most of us are asking, and I may ask this question on behalf of all of us: how soon is soon? Yeah, so that we also try start banking on the promise, right? And I'm sure she'll respond when she gets the opportunity to. But one of the other ways I really would like to look into is that if we are to really steer Kenya into a circular and more climate low carbon economy, we must by all means invest in impact-driven projects and businesses. Yeah, and I would like to start from the very low to as we go up. And some of these businesses are really very the MSMEs, the very micro businesses. And what we have, for instance, done is that we always look for funding partners. For instance, we have worked with the French Embassy, who have provided a funding facility where we started a training program on what we call the waste to value in Mombasa. So we have trained over 200 young youth and women on waste to value, and these are very micro level, especially in the informal sector where the issue of unemployment is quite high. So we are, every time we look at circular economy, we also have to look at opportunities for creating job opportunities. And so what happens is that we train them on issues as small as creating business plans, as well as financial planning, and also how to attract and to approach investment opportunities or banks, or even the county level financial institutions that have been provided by the county governments. And after that, what we did is that we created some sort of a competition where the best business plan was provided for a small seed fund to help them kick off the ground, and then through hand-holding and mentorship, then they are able to scale slowly. Now, coming back to the larger level, probably the most that are presented here today, we must, and I'm glad you mentioned that we can freely talk about the banks. So the banks, if we can start looking at incentivizing, green businesses, green projects as well, and try to see, separate the different financial models and financial facilities from the normal and say we have a facility specifically for green businesses where you now start looking at roadmaps instead of the past financial history like you mentioned. So approaching it this way and sandboxing will help that give the opportunities to small businesses that are making impact on the planet and the environment and the people as well, but haven't yet kicked off the ground to a point where they can come and present their cases as other business cases. Awareness creation, as Margaret mentioned, is a very big gap because institutions are looking or have been fixated on the idea that this is high-risk investment with low returns. So if we can create a lot of awareness around the same and the opportunities that are there, and also have faith in a brighter future, a circular economy for me is a promise of a better future. And if we can have faith in that and also start sandboxing businesses, then I think that would be great. I would like to bring our attention to the National Green Fiscal Incentives Policy Framework by the government. And I remember reading it, and there was a promise of the establishment of the Kenya Green Investment Bank, if I remember right, yeah? And I look forward to seeing the implementation of this, because then at least we will have one financial institution in the country that is completely focused on green businesses and that is not competing with the other institutions on other models. So having a focused investment bank that is only on green fiscal incentives, then that will also create that incentive for all of us who are interested in circular economy to have the faith to go forward and bring in our ideas into action.
Okay, Jocelyn, thank you so much. I'm a bit curious about what you mentioned on county level, that you have been linking up some companies, supporting them to be able to access some funds from the county. Can you share with us a little bit about that? What do you mean by counties funds at county level?
I'm looking at Nasra because she's at the county level, and I think maybe given the opportunity she would be able to answer that question better. But we have incentives like what we have, the Women Fund, and I know again they look at incentives where they are incentivizing or financing all kind of women or women group that come with any sort of business idea. But again, the role that we have been playing is to also bring the attention to sustainable businesses or women who, that a lady at the county or the local level who is creating furniture from tires. And it has become quite a growing business, but they don't know how to approach the Women Fund because it's unconventional business model. Yeah. So again, creating the awareness and also saying that these are businesses that are worth looking at, and bringing also the national sustainable waste model down to the county level has been a very key move.
Well, thank you so much. I was not aware of that fund. Do you mean there is a women fund for each county, or there are some counties that they have put it in place? And if so, which ones?
I want to believe the Youth Fund and the Women Fund are in all counties. I am not aware, though, which are at the top in terms of implementation.
All right. Thank you so much. I mean, we spoke before about impact investors, especially when we're talking about investors in Basigo. I would like to get the views of Margaret on that. On what role do you think that impact investors, and there are a number of them, that they are actually having offices or based in Nairobi, not only for impact investments in Kenya, but also for the region. But what is the role that you think that impact investing can play in financing circular economy companies?
Thank you, Alonso. I think maybe before I jump to that question, let me address what had been
there was
raised.
a question from Josephine. Sorry.
Yes, correct. So to clarify, we are doing a lot as the bank related to circular economy. We have the Alliance and we have the Circular Economy Facility. What I mentioned we have not yet invested through is the partial credit guarantees and the partial risk guarantees. Those have not yet, to the best of my knowledge, have not yet been applied towards circular economy. But across other sectors, those instruments have been applied. But I also wanted to talk about, to link with what she mentioned about the green banks, the green fiscal incentives policy, and the proposal for green banks. So, we've also identified this need as a bank, and we did a study on how could African countries develop green financing institutions. Ideally, the practice would be not to establish a standalone institution, but to try to mainstream the principles of green financing within existing institutions. So I think the study is available online. You can find it and read the work that was done and the pilot countries where the work was undertaken. But going forward, there will be a green financing facility within the bank where we hope to offer green lines of credit to financial intermediaries. So through those current local banks, you could go approach them and they may have a line of credit that is specific for green investments. Now the themes and the criteria, of course, will be specific for each institution, but we see this as a potential way for financing some of the circular economy ideas that we have here. Now, to your question on impact investing, within the bank, we do have equity investments. We've invested in a number of funds where we've been able to de-risk. So the whole point of impact investing is to pool together finances, and then each investor is then able to minimize their risk in investing in a new or untested area. So we've had great success with some of the impact funds that we have invested in. We've even had phase 2, phase 3, and again, all of this information is available online. So what we see there is two things: de-risking our investment and alignment with our objectives. So each institution that puts in the money into an impact fund has its own objectives, and you always want to see alignment of the impact fund with your own objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, you see, we are moving in the program, in the panel, and there is something that I would like to get from three of you, because you are part of the circular economy ecosystem in different ways. You are a company. Margaret is a bank. Josephine is working in an organization that is linking up companies with programs, etc. So this is what we call eventually the ecosystem of circular economy. You're part of the ecosystem in different ways. How do you think, in your different views, maybe starting by you, because you are again closest to me, how do you think that we can do the ecosystem of circular economy in Kenya to be able to collaborate and be closer? And when we talk about the ecosystem, also we include government at different levels, regulations. You were talking about it before. Institutions like you, companies, financial sector, dealing with the funding circular economy, etc. How do you think, or what is your impression of how we can make it work closer together, eventually with the objective of channeling more capital and being able to fund more and more circular economy companies that will be for the benefit of Kenya in general?
Okay. I think going back again to the barriers in the beginning, one of the biggest challenges that we have is a generation, actually, is the assumption that the other person will do it alone. But we are not going to achieve a circular economy by working individually. I'm looking at, and as Nashra mentioned something about green procurement. However, imagine an organization that is now, or a business present today, that is, let's say, producing alternatives to plastics or single-use plastics, yeah? But then they go to sell the products, but the buyer or the consumer or the company, they are not willing to buy them because then they are only ones moving in that direction. However, if we push for green procurement, both at the public and the private levels, and say that, for our organization, we are only going to procure products that are more sustainable and more circular. And then Adolfo's, from the EU perspective, they say the same. And then your perspective, you say the same. And all of us here, we say the same. That has already created a market for more sustainable products. And so by promoting green procurement, all of us in action, we have made a difference. For a circular economy action agenda, it is a rallying call for me, for the government, for the private sector, for the civil society, for the consumers, and for you and I to come together, and each one of us to play a role in making sure that we actually achieve this vision. Because it's possible, but we cannot do it alone. We have to work as one.
Thank you. Let's hear from Berta. Yes?
So I'll just echo what Josephine has said. You cannot succeed in isolation. You cannot succeed on your own. So collaboration is important. And there's the public-private collaboration. Just to bring it home and give an example. So our business is very dependent on the power we get from KPLC to charge. So if KPLC double one morning their prices, then it makes my product not attractive in the market, because then it becomes more expensive to charge than to just go and fuel with diesel. So such partnerships are important, where, for example, we've been lobbying with EPRA and KPLC to lower the electricity prices for e-mobility, and they published a tariff, I think effective 1st of April, where they brought down the costs. So such, just to give an example, such collaboration, such partnerships are important. And I think the other thing that I might add is to come together like-minded people or people in the same sector. If you don't have any associations, then you're able to have a voice to lobby with the government, whichever stakeholders.
Thank you so much. Let's give the chance also to Margaret. Yes.
Thank you. I think what I'd really like to highlight is when promoting circular economy, I think one of the driving agendas is improvement in quality of life, but also job creation. So the potential for circular economy to create jobs and to create economic opportunities is vast, and we see it across many countries in Africa. One of the things that we're looking to also encourage is skills development, skills transfer. The requirement to start a circular economy business requires certain skills. You may need certain technology, you may need certain access to information. So I think those are the areas where we see great potential to support the circular economy agenda.
Thank you so much. I think that I don't have the watch with me, sorry. But I've been recommended that we open now for some questions from the audience. So please, if there is any question for any of the panelists, let us know now, and then we open up for those questions. Yes. I see at least 2 hands there. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is John Koyer Bare, and I'm a member, Kenya chapter member of the African Circular Economy in Nairobi. And I want to congratulate the organizers of this seminar. It's very informative, and it has brought out some of the things as one of the plenary members said that awareness creation would be very important. My interest goes in the area of the green buildings and the area of construction sector that NASA talked very well about in her presentation. And I would have liked to know from the circular economy, because it hasn't come out, we have a number of areas where you can be able to reuse materials from construction sites, and we have old buildings, some that are not listed. And a number of people or investors are bringing them down, and then you find that that material can be reused. But there are restrictions in the legislation. The National Building Construction Code of 2022 has already given certain specific requirements in its section 58 and 59 about the standard of material that that particular reusable material needs to meet. Now, for those who are recycling or recovering those particular materials and putting them onto the market, is there information for them to know that these are meeting the requirements? Then finally, there are, for example, plastics that are being recycled, and they are poles, fencing poles, for example, for construction again. And they are good because we have a lot of insects and ants that eat a lot of concrete, even concrete poles. And the wooden ones just become wasted after, say, 10, 15 years. It's not sustainable. So for a sustainable economy, looking at circularity, then these awareness and policy linkages need to be put in place to help those who want to invest or venture in those areas and create jobs, really to have a sustainable framework within which they can operate. Thank you.
Nars, I think this is for you as well, no? Isn't it? So we go back to you on that. Maybe right now it's okay. Yes. Yes.
So thank you so much for your question and comment as well. I'm grateful for that. In terms of the comment around the building code section 58 and 59, I would say no, there's not been information made public so that people could understand what's going on. And that's one of the things that I had mentioned earlier, that there's a gap. So we need to be specific in our approach and say, we've noted as ACEN that this is currently the status. But we propose the following because of this, which will mean this. So what I was trying to tell you is that the gaps are there. That's not something we'll debate. It's a fact. There's a gap. But then how are we plugging into those gaps and translating them to solutions that will also feature in policy, feature in the supply chain, create opportunities, and provide solutions so that you all can have opportunities from financing to partnerships and impact. So in terms of now, what I would want from you, because one of the things we're doing as KGBS is we are working on greening the building code, okay? So what I would want is perhaps we could consider having a comment roundtable where we are plugging in specifically from a circularity angle. As we think about sustainability broadly, what is this, circularity component that we can plug into the building code? And in that journey, what then needs to change in the market? There needs to be capacity building. There needs to be an understanding of impact. There needs to be an understanding of we're transitioning, how slow or fast this transition needs to be. Because it would be unfair for also businesses who have done things for decades, right? Who now have to wake up with all these requirements, but maybe they were not even aware of these requirements and what it means for their businesses. So that engagement is key, solutions are key, and a framework for that is key. So I agree with you, and I challenge you to engage us as KGBS and as your member of County Assembly to have that roundtable so that we can have that conversation. And I'd be more than happy to take those contributions to the Ministry of Lands. Yeah. The second aspect, which was on the sustainable economy and looking at how advocacy and policy will, play a key role in guiding the framework for investment, I agree. I don't disagree on that. But again, as I said, we talk a lot in silos. What I want is for us to have a strategy and say step 1, step 2, step 3, and have milestones with clear end goals or objectives that we want and how we can track that. Because if we say this is not done, but we're not actually contributing to that solution, we become just another voice in the room, and that's not what we want. We want to be in a position where we're guiding and influencing change so that we can have the outcomes we want. So thank you for that. And I think as we think about this, I also want to encourage you to connect it to the issue of building capacity in a way that not only translates to influencing policy and regulation. I also want you to think about it from a business perspective. How does capacity then link to bankability? Because if you're addressing a solution, maybe it's a project, maybe it's a business, what are you addressing in such a way that could unlock financing for you? Because if you do those two things together, what you have then is a robust answer to a lot of problems, even the government's problems in accessing and unlocking finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Narsa, and thank you, John, also for the very interesting question, by the way, because we like interesting questions. Before I open again for questions and answers, I'm going to open. I wanted to give the chance to our European Union Bank, our European Investment Bank. You know, the EU is the EU, then we have a bank. The bank is called European Investment Bank. And we are like family, you know. So sometimes, depending on the operation, we are like cousins, second cousins, or brothers, it depends, you know. But anyhow, let me open it up for my friend and colleague, Jan William, because maybe there is something to add from your side in terms of your circular economy support in Kenya, and you have any plan for the sector?
Okay, like brothers often do, put each other on the spot. Thanks, Adolfo, for that. Yeah, so you know, it's not an easy story to tell in terms of supporting entrepreneurs in the circular economy space. I think we have to be honest about that. You know, all entrepreneurs face issues regarding access to finance. Often it's an equity question. It's not a loan question. And we are a development bank, and I think a colleague from the African Development Bank has already said much as what I would say as well as the European Investment Bank. Thankfully, partnering with the European Commission allows us to provide funding in equity through funds, either providing guarantees or equity itself. And of course, partnering with intermediary banks, such as equity. But indeed, it has been focused on the agricultural sector, and we look forward to working with the European Commission in developing the same credit lines for the circular economy space. We also have ongoing programs to further invest, or to at least create bankable solutions and programs at county level. We have a program. I'll let Joyce explain a little bit more on COPIP, and we have the program manager here as well. That is to create provide feasibility studies for projects that other IFIs can also invest in ensuring that the Clean Oceans Initiative, in other words, making sure that plastic waste is not general waste, solid waste doesn't enter the oceans. Also, we are working with the central bank on a program because that is often an issue that banks don't realize what the opportunities are in the circular economy investments. And they underestimate the risk of their current portfolios that are not I would say, sensitive or not adapted to climate change or climate risks. So we are working with the central bank, but also in a technical assistance program, but also for downstream in intermediary banks to have a proper assessment of their portfolio risk. Because only if banks understand what their exposure is to climate or ecological disasters or stresses, will they also see the opportunity, I think, in investing in the circular economy. So there's a lot of, these are grant-funded programs, and I think grant funding is often what's required in developing this, but we really hope that we can and when you don't ask us when, we will set up this credit line, because then I will bounce the question back to my friend Adolfo. But we, as a climate bank, we stand ready to, and we already have climate-related facilities, but not yet in Kenya. And we do require partner banks that are willing to sign up to that as well. I don't know. I spoke a lot now, actually, more than.
No, it's fine. It's fine. That is we wanted to hear from you as well, since you also came. Let me maybe reopen again for question and answers. I see now more hands. Before there were two, now there are more. And I don't know how we are managing on time because I don't have the watch. So, okay, we allow a couple of questions more. I saw the lady in front here. Okay, you have the mic. Okay, fine. So, yes, please go ahead.
My question is to no particular panelists, but I'm hoping the conversation around circular economy unfolds in this direction. So from my understanding of circular economy is that it fundamentally understands that things are supposed to be cyclic in nature. And the reason why this has become an urgent conversation right now is because that has not been happening. You know, there's too many carbon emissions and the environment is not able to handle it. Now, from my understanding of African cultures, as Anthony said earlier, the coinage of the phrase circular economy is just catching up with practices that have already been part of what we are doing. I'll speak only for the African culture because that's what I know of, but that's something that we've been participating in. So the African culture has been part of the circular economy. When we're having these conversations, a lot of what I'm hearing and what I'm understanding is the setting is very urbanized. And what that sounds to me right now is it's sort of alienated the people in other, in rural settings. And that sort of creates an illusion that we are helping create, or we are helping just teach the other culture, the people not in an urban setting, new things. Well, what is happening is really that there should be information of integration of the wisdoms and the knowledge that they already have, and seeing how they can be aligned with what is happening now. I think that's a very interesting stance for that conversation to take, because while we're having this conversation in an urban setting, the higher population of at least Kenya is beyond the city, and a lot of things that happen to the bigger population. So if we're implementing policies, it's policies that are not only affecting the people in the urban setting, but people who are also in the rural setting. So my question to the people.
Are you sure there's a question?
Yes, it's all right.
It's okay. No, thank you so much. It's okay.
So yes, my question is, we're having a lot of conversations on financial capacity that can be offered to the people, but have we tried, is there in any way an institution that's here or here that has integrated the knowledge and the wisdoms that belong to the people in a way that it doesn't seem that we're teaching them, but more integrating the things that they already know, so that there's no alienation to already what they know and they've been practicing for years? That's the question.
Now, of course, I have to check who of you want to take this question. Maybe three of you. I mean, what is your own views? Because it's a very philosophical question. Very interesting. Who wants to take on answering? Maybe three of you, or maybe Josephine? Okay. Yes.
Well, this is
You take the challenge. Eh?
this is the instance where you say, "I'll try." But I like the view that you have given to the question, and I think you're right when you say some of these practices have been there for generations. And sometimes what we need to go back is to look at the traditions. And I think my assumption would be the reason why the focus has been quite a lot on the urban setups is because the rural setups are still traditionally practicing circular economy. When I look at, for instance, when I was growing up in something that is already happening, I grew up in, I don't know how many people know Mwea, but it's a rice growing area. So looking at agriculture, what happens is that we also had cow farms. And the manure from the cow farms were what would fertilize the rice farms. And so already we look beyond circular and we look at regenerative as well. Right? The other aspect I would also look at is fashion. When you talk about circular economy in fashion, I don't know how many of us, their parents bought them bigger sized clothes so that they would wear them for longer. I am a victim of that. So that you would have to wait until the next Christmas for you to get a new outfit, right? And with that, we made sure that we reduced the amount that we disposed of the environment because of torn and worn out clothes. So some of these practices are actually still ongoing in the rural areas, but again, the idea of knowledge creation and how we break down that information, because circular economy can be quite a jugular. So for many of us may not understand what circular economy is. So when we go to the rural area, it's trying to break down this information and telling them practically, this is what we mean by being circular or being regenerative. And, just the gap is there. And probably we need to go back to the drawing board and start looking at some of those traditions that are working. The issue of construction going back, and we are talking about low-cost living, low-cost housing, yeah? I don't know how many people know Dr. Agan Oscar of Green Pavers, yeah? Dr. Agan is transforming plastic waste into building materials, and that would be fencing poles, paving blocks, but now has gone a step further to actually develop housing models. Some are already in use, starting with small construction structures like washrooms, something like that. But the question comes, we are areas where this solution that he's providing could actually be a longer-term solution to the housing problem that we have in Kenya and in Africa. But how many of us are willing to live in houses that are made of plastics? Be honest. How many? Yes? 10, from the show of hands, it's like 5% of us.
If you ask the question again, there will be more hands.
Sorry?
One of the things with this new technology of recycling plastic or converting, you mix plastic with the sand. So the toxicity of this material has not been yet, researched very well. So are we talking, what will be the consequence of this material in the maybe coming 10 years? Are we looking at another phase of asbestos? And I think this is one of the problems we have in Africa, because we don't have really, we are not looking at a very systemic way of handling circular economy. We are equating circular economy to recycling. And if we do that, then there are so many elements that we are missing in the circular economy sphere, because actually recycling should be the last thing that we should be thinking of when we talk about the circular economy. So it is, so that is one of the reasons. And if probably there are some instruments that will are there that maybe because we are talking of finances, I would think maybe it would be, I don't know if there are some instruments that can support knowledge base. We have a lot of students coming from universities. If you look at countries like the Netherlands, there are so many service industries, like companies that are coming up, entrepreneurs that are coming up, that are doing more research, trying to understand how can we integrate circular economy in a very systemic way and in a very contextual way that will fit the country. So I think also these are kind of discussions that we should be having if we are really going to transform this country and move it to the right direction.
Very good.
Thank you. Very good. We clap because
I like to clap. I have this in the hand, you know.
We clap because that is the exact reason why 80% of us have not raised their hands as being comfortable enough to live in a plastic made, and even the container made. There are sustainable solutions that are there, but the awareness that has been made, the research that has been made is not adequate enough to create awareness that would say this research proves that this one is healthy enough for human consumption of human living, and so you see it kind of will increase consumption or consumption among the consumers, all right? So again, the issue that you have raised of research, investing in research remains very key, and linking her question to her explanation again as to the gap that is there in terms of the needs in the market, the needs in the country, the needs in the rural areas, and the products that we are providing. Let's support the businesses, the products, the innovations that we have with research that can support that. I think she also.
Yes.
Thank you. I think this debate around circular economy being inherent in African tradition is very true. Actually, at the last year's World Circular Economy Forum, the Rwanda minister put it very clearly. Africa as it is circular, and what we just need to do is to try to harness our practices, to try to scale them up, and of course to make them more efficient. And I'm sure we all know in our households how many lives a plastic container lived before it was finally thrown out. So we do carry out these practices. On the issue of research, I wanted to share my views on some work that has been done towards raising the body of knowledge on circular economy. So there was a research paper called the 5 Big Bets, which was published, I think it was just before the pandemic, so 2019, 2020. And the research, looked at the different opportunities. It's not just recycling, but looked at the different opportunities in Africa and identified 5 areas that could be considered big bests. So one is on the built environment, the other one is on food systems, the other one is on fashion and textiles, which has been mentioned, and then we have electronics waste and plastics and packaging. So, if you want to remember them, it's the 3 basic needs: food, shelter, clothing, and then also technology through the phones and electronics. So that research paper is available. It outlines in each of those areas what are the potential circular economy opportunities that exist. And then lastly, on the topic of green buildings and construction materials, I think one of the, when we undertook the study in the 3 countries, we identified one of the innovative ideas was alternatives to building materials. And one of the ones that was identified for Africa was actually bamboo as an alternative to the use of wood. So, you're making the case that we shall protect our indigenous forests, but at the same time, not hinder construction and development from taking place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now let me look at my boss lady there and tell me how we're going on time, if we still have time for another
There's one
interesting
lady
question.
who wanted to ask a question. Keep it brief, and only one person can answer, just because of time. That's all.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm not actually asking a question. I just want to confirm to my sister here that your contribution, your thought was very pertinent. And I'm actually in that space where I'm practicing. I'm Eunice Barasa. I run a social business called Lima Farms and Foods. And what we do is vegetable dehydration. Now, when we go to rural areas and we are talking to our grandmothers and our mothers and our aunties and uncles and telling them that we have to dry vegetables, let me use dry because that's not the right word, it's dehydration. It is not new. They've been doing it. Our grandmothers have been doing it all along. But now, how can we be able to plug the knowledge that they have into what is actually what we are tackling right now, which is climate change, food and nutrition insecurity. So how do we come in? We are like, yes, we are going to enable you continue with this practice, but let's only give it, a better look. We are working on solar dryers. And for me, a solution is not a solution if it's not affordable, if it's not accessible, if it's not contextualized. I cannot go and tell a rural farmer that you need to buy a solar dryer worth 50,000 Kenya shillings. That is not just practical. In as much as they can afford a hole, to dig, give them an equipment that is going to translate into a healthy product. Give them the necessary skills. I am appropriately trained by a food scientist so that I can be able to control the product. I know the critical control points so that at the end of the day, the product, when it hits the market, and I pray that we'll all be able to tap into the culture of consuming dehydrated vegetables, you will be able to consume it with a lot of confidence. Why should you eat dehydrated vegetables? It's a climate smart decision. Number one, you are reducing on the food mile. Can you imagine having fresh vegetables coming in from Kisii every day to Nairobi? How much pollution is that we are releasing into the atmosphere? Quite a lot. The water that should have been used even to grow fresh vegetables every season, can we use that space and that water to grow probably the millet? I'm quite fast because I've been given 1 minute. Can we use that space and that time and that water to grow the millets? We go back into the sorghum and stuff like that to increase the kind of crop diversity that we bring on the tables. Well, the conversation is quite long, but be at peace. We are in that space. This dialogue that is here, we have to take it down to the grassroots. It is there. Here it's just the jargon and probably the lipstick, but everything is there.
Thank you for your contribution. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you so much, panelists. I don't know if you want to say something.
Thank you very much. I can see that we have a very passionate audience, and that is very good for all of us. Let me just hope that you had a good panel. In the end, panels and bringing good panelists like the ones that we have today, the excellent panelists that we have today, is about learning. I hope that we learned something. I mean, I learned a number of things today myself. So please join me on congratulating the panelists today. It was great to be together. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.